Marcus Thompson checked his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. The departure gate for Flight 247 to Chicago buzzed with the usual pre-boarding chaos. But something felt different today. He had been traveling this route every month for the past 2 years as a regional sales manager for a tech company, and he prided himself on being punctual. Today, however, his morning had started with one problem after another. First, his alarm clock had failed to ring due to a power outage that lasted just long enough to reset all the electronics in his apartment. Then, his usual taxi driver called in sick, forcing him to wait an extra 20 minutes for a replacement. The traffic on Highway 95 moved like molasses, and every red light seemed to last an eternity. By the time he reached the airport, Marcus was already cutting it close. The security line stretched longer than usual, filled with families heading out for spring break vacations. Children cried, parents juggled carry-on bags and diaper bags, and elderly passengers moved slowly through the metal detectors. Marcus tapped his foot impatiently, watching the minutes tick away on the departure board. His presentation to the Chicago branch was scheduled for tomorrow morning, and missing this flight would mean disappointing his entire team. Finally clearing security, Marcus jogged through the terminal, his laptop bag bouncing against his hip. Gate C12 seemed miles away, and the moving walkways were packed with travelers moving at a snail's pace. He dodged around families with strollers, business travelers buried in their phones, and airport staff pushing wheelchairs. As he rounded the corner toward his gate, Marcus nearly collided with an elderly woman who had stopped abruptly in the middle of the walkway. She stood barely 5 feet tall, with silver hair neatly pinned back and wearing a simple navy blue dress that had seen better days. Her small suitcase had tipped over, spilling its contents across the polished airport floor. "Oh my goodness," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the airport noise. She knelt down slowly, her movements careful and deliberate, as if each motion caused her pain. Scattered around her were personal items: a worn leather photo album, several pill bottles, reading glasses, and what appeared to be important documents. Marcus glanced at his watch again. Boarding would begin in less than 10 minutes. He could see Gate C12 just ahead, and if he kept moving, he would make it with time to spare. Other travelers walked around the woman, some glancing down with mild concern but continuing on their way. Airport life moved fast, and everyone had somewhere important to be. The woman struggled to gather her belongings, her hands shaking slightly as she reached for the scattered items. One of the pill bottles had rolled several feet away, nearly under the feet of passing travelers. She tried to stand to retrieve it but wavered, placing one hand against the wall for support. Marcus stopped walking. Something about the woman's quiet dignity in the face of her struggle struck him deeply. She wasn't crying or calling out for help, just methodically trying to collect her things while travelers streamed around her like water around a stone. "Ma'am, let me help you with that," Marcus said, setting down his laptop bag and kneeling beside her. The woman looked up at him with surprised gratitude. Her eyes were a striking pale blue, and despite her obvious fatigue, they held a sharpness that suggested a keen intelligence. "Oh, you don't need to trouble yourself," she said softly. "I can manage." "It's no trouble at all," Marcus replied, carefully gathering the documents and placing them back in her suitcase. He noticed they were airline tickets and what looked like legal papers, all bearing the name Eleanor Whitmore. As he helped her stand, Marcus couldn't help but notice how frail she seemed. Her grip on his arm was gentle but desperate, as if she was barely managing to stay upright. She moved with the careful precision of someone who had learned to navigate the world despite physical limitations. "Are you traveling alone today, Mrs. Whitmore?" Marcus asked, reading her name from one of the documents. Eleanor nodded, smoothing down her dress with shaking hands. "Yes, I'm flying to Chicago to visit my grandson. He's getting married next week, and I couldn't miss it for the world." Marcus felt a pang in his chest. Here was this elderly woman, clearly struggling but determined to be there for her family's important moment. He looked toward his gate again and saw the boarding process had begun. The gate agent was scanning tickets for first-class passengers, and his zone would be called soon. "Which gate are you looking for?" he asked, though part of him already dreaded the answer. "Gate C12. Eleanor said, consulting a piece of paper from her purse. "Flight 247 to Chicago," Marcus's stomach dropped. They were booked on the same flight, and from the looks of it, Eleanor was going to need significant help getting there on time. The gate was still a good 3-minute walk away, and she moved slowly, each step deliberate and careful. He watched as the gate agent announced the boarding of Zone 2 passengers, his zone. The choice before him was clear. He could politely excuse himself, rush to the gate and make his flight as planned, or he could stay and help Eleanor, potentially missing his flight and disappointing his colleagues in Chicago. Marcus looked at Eleanor's face, saw the quiet determination there, and made his decision. "Mrs. Whitmore, that's my flight too. Why don't I help you get there? We can take our time." Her face lit up with relief and gratitude. "Are you sure? I don't want to make you late." "Don't worry about it," Marcus said, offering her his arm for support and pulling both their suitcases behind him. "We'll make it together." As they began walking slowly toward the gate, Marcus felt his phone buzzing with messages, probably from his colleagues confirming his arrival time. He ignored it. For the first time in months, maybe years, he was putting someone else's needs before his own schedule. It felt simultaneously terrifying and liberating. The gate agent's voice echoed through the terminal. "Final boarding call for Flight 247 to Chicago." Marcus and Eleanor moved as quickly as her condition allowed, but it wasn't fast enough. By the time they reached Gate C-12, the boarding door had closed, and the jet bridge was already pulling away from the aircraft. Through the large windows, Marcus could see their plane backing away from the gate, its engines beginning to spin up for departure. The gate agent, a young man with tired eyes and a rumpled uniform, looked up from his computer screen as they approached. "I'm sorry, folks, but Flight 247 has departed. The door closed 5 minutes ago." Eleanor's face fell and she gripped Marcus's arm tighter. "Oh no, I can't miss Tommy's wedding. It's next Saturday, and this was the only direct flight I could afford." Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach. His presentation was scheduled for 9 in the morning, and his entire team was counting on him. But looking at Eleanor's distressed face, he knew he couldn't abandon her now. "What's the next available flight to Chicago?" Marcus asked the gate agent. The young man typed rapidly on his keyboard, his expression growing more concerned with each passing second. "Let me check. Oh, this isn't good. There's a major weather system moving through the Midwest right now. We've had to cancel most flights to Chicago for the rest of today." Eleanor sank into one of the nearby chairs, her small frame seeming to fold in on itself. "I don't understand all this technology and rebooking," she said quietly. "My grandson bought this ticket for me online, and I barely know how to use the computer." The gate agent continued typing. "I can get you both on a flight tomorrow morning at 6:15 a.m., but I have to warn you, the weather might affect that flight too. Spring storms in the Midwest can be unpredictable." "What about other airlines?" Marcus asked, pulling out his phone to check flight tracking apps. "Same story everywhere," the agent replied. "The storm system is affecting all the major hubs. O'Hare, Midway, even some of the smaller airports are experiencing delays and cancellations." Marcus watched Eleanor fumble with an old flip phone, trying to call someone. Her fingers shook as she dialed, and she had to start over twice before getting the number right. "Tommy? It's Grandma Eleanor," she said when someone finally answered. "I'm afraid I missed my flight, dear." No, it wasn't the airline's fault. A kind young man was helping me, and we just couldn't get there in time." Marcus could hear a young man's voice on the other end, speaking rapidly. Eleanor's eyes began to fill with tears. "I understand you're busy with the wedding preparations," she said. "Don't worry about me. I'll figure something out." She hung up the phone and sat quietly for a moment, staring at her hands. Marcus felt his heart break a little watching this dignified woman try to process her disappointment. "Mrs. Whitmore, what did your grandson say?" Marcus asked gently. "He's very stressed about the wedding," Eleanor explained. "His fiancée's family is flying in from 3 different states, and they've been planning this for over a year. He said he understands, but can't help me with another ticket right now. The wedding expenses have been quite overwhelming." Marcus looked at the departure board, then at Eleanor, then made another decision that surprised even him. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm going to help you get to Chicago. We'll figure this out together." She looked up at him with those sharp blue eyes. "Oh, I couldn't ask you to do that." You've already done so much, and you have your own business to attend to. You're not asking, Marcus said firmly. I'm offering. He approached the gate agent again. Is there any way to get them on a flight from a nearby airport? What about flying into Milwaukee or Indianapolis and driving to Chicago? The gate agent's expression softened as he watched Marcus's determination to help Eleanor. Let me check some alternative routes, he said, typing more commands into his system. Marcus pulled out his phone and quickly typed a message to his Chicago colleagues. Flight canceled due to weather. Will need to reschedule presentation. Family. Emergency came up that I need to handle first. It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. Eleanor wasn't his family, but in the past hour, he had begun to feel responsible for her well-being in a way that surprised him. Okay, I found something, the gate agent said. There's a flight leaving from Baltimore Airport in about 4 hours. It connects through Atlanta and gets into Chicago tomorrow morning around 10 a.m. It's not ideal, but the weather looks clearer on that route. How much would that cost? Eleanor asked, already reaching for her worn purse. Marcus saw her count out several $20 bills, clearly most of the cash she had brought for the trip. The gate agent quoted a price that made Eleanor's face pale. I'll cover the difference, Marcus said quickly before Eleanor could protest. Absolutely not, Eleanor said firmly, showing a flash of the strength that lurked beneath her frail appearance. I won't be a charity case. It's not charity, Marcus said. It's what decent people do for each other. For the next 20 minutes, they debated the flight costs. Eleanor was proud and independent despite her physical limitations. She had raised 4 children as a widow, worked as a seamstress until she was 75, and had never asked anyone for handouts. Marcus, meanwhile, found himself thinking about his own grandmother, who had passed away 3 years earlier. He remembered missing her 80th birthday party because of a work conference that seemed so important at the time. He remembered the regret he still carried about choosing his career over family moments that could never be recovered. Finally, they reached a compromise. Eleanor would accept help with the flight cost, but she insisted on paying Marcus back once she returned home from the wedding. The gate agent booked their new flights and handed them the boarding passes. You'll need to get to Baltimore within the next 2 hours to make this connection, he said. It's about a 3-hour drive from here. Marcus looked at Eleanor, who was already looking overwhelmed by the complexity of their new travel plans. Her grandson couldn't help with logistics. She barely understood modern travel booking, and the stress of the situation was clearly taking a physical toll on her. Mrs. Whitmore, Marcus said, I know this might sound presumptuous, but would you mind if I traveled with you to Chicago? I can help make sure you get to the wedding safely. Eleanor studied his face carefully. Young man, you don't even know me. Why would you go to such trouble? Marcus thought about that question for a moment. Because someone should, he said simply. And because I think my grandmother would have liked you very much. The rental car counter at the airport buzzed with frustrated travelers, all trying to rearrange their plans due to the weather delays. Marcus stood in line with Eleanor, who sat quietly in a nearby chair, still processing the rapid changes to their travel plans. He had insisted on upgrading to a comfortable sedan, knowing that the 3-hour drive to Baltimore would be challenging enough for someone in Eleanor's condition. While waiting, Marcus used the time to call his office and explain the situation to his manager. He was honest about helping an elderly passenger, but vague about the details, simply stating that he would need to reschedule the Chicago presentation and would work remotely for the next few days. Thompson, this is highly irregular, his manager said over the phone. The Chicago account is worth $500,000 to our company. I understand the importance, sir, Marcus replied, glancing at Eleanor, who was carefully organizing her documents in her purse. But sometimes life requires us to make difficult choices. I'll make sure the presentation happens, just not on the original timeline. After securing the rental car, Marcus helped Eleanor into the passenger seat, adjusting it for her comfort and making sure she had easy access to her medications. As they pulled away from the airport, Eleanor seemed to relax for the first time since their ordeal began. Marcus, she said softly, may I ask what you do for work? You seem very responsible and organized. I'm a regional sales manager for a technology company, Marcus explained, navigating through the airport traffic. I sell software solutions to businesses across the eastern United States. Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. That sounds important, and I imagine you travel quite a bit. For work. Almost every week, Marcus confirmed. I've been on probably 200 flights in the past 5 years. My goodness, Eleanor said. I've only been on an airplane 3 times in my entire life. The first time was in 1962 when my husband took me to California for our honeymoon. The second time was to visit my sister in Florida about 15 years ago. And this was supposed to be the third time. As they drove through the countryside between airports, Eleanor began to share her story. She had been married to Robert Whitmore for 47 years before he passed away from cancer 8 years ago. They had never had much money, but Robert had worked steadily as a mechanic, and Eleanor had taken in sewing work to help make ends meet. We raised 4 children in a 2-bedroom house, Eleanor said with pride. Tommy's father, Michael, was our youngest. He became an engineer and moved to Chicago for work. That's where he met Tommy's mother. Marcus learned that Eleanor lived alone in the same house where she had raised her children. Her neighbors looked in on her regularly, and she maintained a small garden that provided her with vegetables and a sense of purpose. She was fiercely independent, but acknowledged that her arthritis and heart condition were making daily tasks increasingly difficult. Tommy is my only grandchild, Eleanor continued. Michael and his wife tried for years to have another baby, but it wasn't meant to be. When Tommy graduated from college last year and got engaged, I promised myself I wouldn't miss his wedding. For anything. Tell me about the bride, Marcus said, genuinely interested in Eleanor's story. Eleanor's face brightened considerably. Her name is Sarah and she's lovely. She's a teacher at an elementary school and she makes Tommy so happy. They met in college and have been together for 6 years. Sarah even calls me Grandma Eleanor, which just melts my heart. They stopped at a small diner about halfway to Baltimore, where Eleanor insisted on buying Marcus lunch despite his protests. Over coffee and sandwiches, their conversation deepened. Marcus, I hope you don't mind me asking, but you seem like such a kind young man. Are you married? Do you have children? Marcus stirred his coffee thoughtfully. No, I'm not married. I was engaged about 3 years ago, but it didn't work out. Jennifer said I was married to my job more than I was committed to our relationship. She wasn't entirely wrong. Eleanor reached across the table and patted his hand gently. Work is important, dear, but it's not everything. I learned that lesson when Robert got sick. We spent so many years planning for the future that we almost forgot to enjoy the present. What do you mean? Marcus asked. Well, Robert always said we'd travel when he retired. We'd see the Grand Canyon, visit New York City, maybe take a cruise. We saved money for years planning all these adventures we'd have once he stopped working. But then he got sick, and all those dreams just became regrets. Eleanor's wisdom struck Marcus deeply. Here was a woman who had lived through decades of real challenges, raising children on limited income, caring for a sick husband, facing widowhood and aging, yet she spoke without bitterness or self-pity. Mrs. Whitmore, can I ask you something personal? Marcus said as they prepared to leave the diner. Of course, dear. How do you stay so positive? I mean, you faced some real hardships and today has been incredibly stressful, but you seem to handle everything with such grace. Eleanor considered the question carefully as they walked back to the car. I suppose it's because I've learned that worrying about things you can't control is a waste of the energy you need for things you can control. Today, I can't control the weather or the flight cancellations, but I can control how I respond to kindness when it's offered. As they continued driving toward Baltimore, Marcus found himself thinking about his life differently. He had spent the past several years building his career, accumulating possessions, and climbing the corporate ladder. But when was the last time he had felt the kind of satisfaction he was experiencing right now, simply helping another person? Marcus, Eleanor said as they approached the Baltimore airport, I want you to know that what you've done today has restored my faith in young people. In my generation, we were taught to help our neighbors, but I worry sometimes that the world has become too busy and too selfish for such things. I don't think the world has changed that much, Marcus replied. I think people still want to help each other. Sometimes we just need a reminder of what's really important. They returned the rental car and made their way through Baltimore's airport security. Eleanor moved slowly but seemed steadier now, perhaps bolstered by Marcus's constant attention and the knowledge that she wasn't navigating this journey alone. As they sat at their departure gate, waiting for their flight to Atlanta, Eleanor opened her photo album and began showing Marcus pictures of her family. There was Robert in his military uniform looking young and proud. There were baby pictures of her 4 children, school photos, graduation pictures, and wedding photos. This is Tommy, she said, pointing to a recent photo of a young man in a business suit. He works for an airline company in Chicago, started in their customer service department and worked his way up to management. Marcus studied the photo. Tommy looked like a younger version of his grandfather, with Eleanor's intelligent eyes and a warm smile. He must be very proud of you for making this trip, Marcus said. Eleanor's expression became slightly sad. I hope so. Sometimes I worry that I'm becoming a burden to him. He's so busy with his career and planning this wedding, I don't want to add stress to his life. Mrs. Whitmore, Marcus said firmly, grandparents aren't burdens, they're treasures. Tommy is lucky to have you. The flight from Baltimore to Atlanta proceeded smoothly, and Marcus was relieved to see Eleanor relaxing in her window seat. She had never experienced turbulence before, and gripped his arm during the initial bumps after takeoff, but once they reached cruising altitude, she seemed to enjoy watching the landscape pass below them. During the layover in Atlanta, Eleanor insisted they sit near their next departure gate well in advance, despite having nearly 2 hours before their connecting flight. Marcus used the time to check his emails and was surprised to find several messages from his Chicago colleagues expressing concern about his family emergency and offering help if needed. You have good people working with you, Eleanor observed, noticing him reading his emails. Yes, I do, Marcus agreed, realizing he had perhaps been too focused on competition and advancement to appreciate the supportive relationships he had built over the years. Their second flight to Chicago was scheduled to depart at 8:30 p.m. and arrive at 10:45 p.m. local time. As they boarded, Eleanor mentioned that Tommy had arranged for a car service to pick her up at the airport, though she seemed anxious about navigating O'Hare's massive terminals alone. Don't worry, Marcus assured her. I'll make sure you get to your ride safely. Once airborne, Eleanor became more talkative, perhaps feeling that their journey was finally nearing its end. She told Marcus more about her life in the small North Carolina town where she had lived for over 50 years. Our neighborhood used to be filled with families, she said. Children playing in the streets, neighbors borrowing cups of sugar from each other, everyone knowing everyone else's business sometimes too well. She laughed. But over the years, the young families moved away to bigger cities for better jobs, and now it's mostly elderly folks like me. Marcus asked about her daily routine, and Eleanor described a life that was simple but purposeful. She woke early, each morning, tended to her small garden, read the newspaper thoroughly, and often spent afternoons doing alterations and mending for neighbors who still sought out her skilled seamstress work. I don't charge much, she said, just enough to help with the grocery bills and to feel useful. There's something satisfying about fixing things, making them better than they were. That's a valuable skill, Marcus said. Most people today just throw things away and buy new ones. Eleanor nodded sadly. That's part of what's wrong with the world, if you ask me. Everything is disposable now. Relationships, commitments, even family bonds sometimes. People don't want to put in the work to repair things. As the plane began its descent into Chicago, Eleanor grew quiet and seemed nervous again. She checked her purse repeatedly, making sure she had her grandson's contact information, the hotel address, and her return flight details. Mrs. Whitmore, are you worried about something? Marcus asked. Eleanor hesitated before answering. I suppose I'm nervous about seeing Tommy again. It's been almost 2 years since he visited North Carolina, and I know he's under tremendous pressure, with work and the wedding. I don't want him to feel obligated to spend time with me when he has so many other responsibilities. Eleanor, can I tell you something? Marcus said, using her first name for the first time during their journey. Any grandson would be incredibly proud to have you at his wedding. The fact that you traveled across the country despite all the challenges you face shows how much you love him. That's not a burden, that's a gift. The plane touched down at O'Hare Airport at 10:52 p.m., just slightly behind schedule. As they taxied to the gate, Marcus helped Eleanor gather her belongings and prepared for the final leg of their journey together. O'Hare at nearly 11 at night was still bustling with activity, but the crowds were thinner and the pace slightly less frantic than during peak travel hours. Marcus stayed close to Eleanor as they walked through the terminal, her small suitcase rolling beside her as she moved carefully through the busy corridors. "The car service is supposed to meet me at the ground transportation area," Eleanor said, consulting a piece of paper Tommy had sent her. "But I'm not sure exactly where that is." "Don't worry," Marcus said. "I'll help you find it." As they rode the escalator down to the baggage claim and ground transportation level, Eleanor suddenly stopped walking and stared ahead with a confused expression. "Is everything all right?" Marcus asked. Eleanor pointed toward a group of people, standing near the exit doors. "That man over there holding the sign with my name on it, he looks familiar, but that can't be right." Marcus followed her gaze and saw a well-dressed man in his 30s holding a sign that read, "Eleanor Whitmore." The man was scanning the arriving passengers with an anxious expression. "Tommy?" Eleanor called out tentatively. The young man's head snapped up and his face broke into a wide smile. "Grandma Eleanor." Tommy Whitmore hurried toward them, and Marcus was struck by how much he resembled the photos Eleanor had shown him, though he looked tired and stressed. As Tommy embraced his grandmother, Marcus noticed something else. The young man was wearing an expensive suit and appeared to be accompanied by two other professionally dressed individuals who hung back respectfully. "Grandma, I was so worried when you called about missing your flight," Tommy said, holding Eleanor's hands and studying her face. "Are you feeling all right? The trip wasn't too difficult?" "Oh, Tommy, I'm fine," Eleanor assured him. "And I have this wonderful young man to thank for getting me here safely." Tommy turned to Marcus with genuine gratitude. "Sir, I can't tell you how much I appreciate whatever you did to help my grandmother. She means the world to me." "It was my pleasure," Marcus replied, extending his hand. "Marcus Thompson, your grandmother is an extraordinary woman." As they shook hands, one of the professionally dressed men stepped forward and whispered something in Tommy's ear. Tommy's expression grew serious and he glanced around the terminal as if suddenly aware of their surroundings. "Grandma, we should probably get you to the hotel so you can rest," Tommy said. "Tomorrow is going to be a busy day with the rehearsal, dinner." Eleanor looked confused by the sudden urgency in Tommy's manner. "Tommy, dear, you seem different. More formal than I remember." Tommy smiled, but Marcus noticed it didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's just been a stressful few weeks with work and the wedding preparations, Grandma. Nothing for you to worry about." As they walked toward the exit, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this situation than Tommy was letting on. The two men accompanying him stayed at a discreet distance but were clearly watching the terminal around them, with the practiced awareness of security personnel. "Marcus," Eleanor said as they reached the doors leading to the pickup area, "I don't know how to thank you properly for everything you've done. Just enjoy the wedding and give Tommy and Sarah my best wishes," Marcus replied. Tommy stepped forward, again. "Mr. Thompson, I'd like to do something to thank you for helping my grandmother. Could I get your contact information? I'd like to send you something as a token of our appreciation." Marcus pulled out a business card and handed it to Tommy. The young man studied it carefully, and Marcus noticed one of his companions leaning in to read it as well. "Systech Solutions," Tommy read aloud. "You're in the software business?" "Regional sales manager," Marcus confirmed. "We provide technology solutions for airlines, hotels, and other service industries." Something shifted in Tommy's expression, though Marcus couldn't quite identify what it was. "That's interesting," Tommy said carefully. "Very interesting indeed." As Eleanor hugged Marcus goodbye, she whispered, "You've been such a blessing, dear. I hope our paths cross again someday." Marcus watched as Eleanor, Tommy, and the two mysterious companions climbed into a black sedan that looked far more expensive than a typical car service vehicle. As they drove away, Marcus found himself wondering about the strange dynamics he had observed and why Tommy seemed so different from the young man Eleanor had described during their journey. Marcus checked into his hotel near O'Hare and spent the next morning rescheduling his meetings and catching up on work emails. His Chicago presentation had been moved to the following week, and his manager, while not pleased about the delay, had been understanding about the family emergency explanation. Around noon, Marcus received an unexpected phone call from an unknown Chicago number. "Mr. Thompson, this is Tommy Whitmore. We met last night at the airport." "Of course, Tommy. How is Eleanor doing? I hope she got some rest." "She's doing wonderfully, thank you. Actually, that's why I'm calling. My grandmother hasn't stopped talking about you, and she's insisted that I invite you to our wedding tomorrow. She says you're part of the family now." Marcus was touched but hesitant. "That's incredibly kind, but I couldn't intrude on such a personal celebration. I'm just glad I could help her get to Chicago safely." "Mr. Thompson, Marcus, you don't understand. My grandmother is not someone who takes kindness lightly, and she's not someone who changes her mind easily. She's told everyone about the angel who helped her travel across the country, and she's determined to have you at the wedding." After some persuasion, Marcus agreed to attend the ceremony. Tommy provided him with the address of St. Mary's Cathedral and mentioned that the reception would be held at the Chicago Marriott downtown. The next morning, Marcus put on his best suit and took a taxi to the cathedral. He arrived early and was surprised by the scale and elegance of the wedding preparations. The church was decorated with hundreds of white roses and lilies, and the guest list appeared to be substantial, with well-dressed attendees arriving in expensive vehicles. Marcus found a seat toward the back of the church and watched as the wedding party assembled. Eleanor sat in the front row, looking radiant in a navy blue dress that was clearly new, her silver hair professionally styled. She spotted Marcus and waved enthusiastically, drawing the attention of several nearby guests. The ceremony was beautiful and heartfelt. Sarah, the bride, was indeed lovely, just as Eleanor had described. She was a petite brunette with kind eyes and a warm smile that never left her face throughout the service. Tommy looked handsome and happy, though Marcus still noticed the same underlying tension he had observed at the airport. During the exchange of vows, Marcus found himself thinking about Eleanor's words regarding the importance of family and commitment. He watched as she dabbed tears from her eyes, clearly overwhelmed with joy at witnessing her grandson's marriage. After the ceremony, guests moved to the reception at the Marriott. Marcus was surprised when an usher directed him to a table near the front of the ballroom, close to where the immediate family was seated. Eleanor had clearly ensured he would be treated as an honored guest. The reception was lavish beyond what Marcus had expected. The ballroom was decorated with crystal chandeliers and elaborate floral arrangements. A full orchestra provided music, and the dinner service was clearly first class. Marcus began to wonder about the Whitmore family's financial situation, given Eleanor's modest lifestyle and her concerns about affording the flight to Chicago. During dinner, Eleanor made her way over to Marcus's table, moving more slowly than usual, but beaming with happiness. "Marcus, dear, I'm so glad you could come," she said, sitting beside him. "Wasn't the ceremony beautiful? Sarah looked like a princess." "It was perfect, Eleanor. You must be so proud." "I am," she said, then lowered her voice. "I have to confess something to you, though. I haven't been entirely honest about our family situation." Before Marcus could respond, Tommy appeared at their table with Sarah still in her wedding dress trailing behind him. "Grandma Eleanor, there you are," Tommy said. "Sarah and I wanted to thank Mr. Thompson personally." Sarah stepped forward and hugged Marcus warmly. "Eleanor has told me everything about your kindness. I can't believe you missed your own business trip to help her get here." "It was the right thing to do," Marcus said simply. Tommy looked around the ballroom, then back at Marcus. "Mr. Thompson, would you mind stepping outside with me for a moment? There's something I need to discuss with you." Eleanor and Sarah exchanged a meaningful look that Marcus couldn't interpret. "Go ahead, dear," Eleanor said. "Tommy has something important to tell you." Tommy led Marcus to a quiet hallway outside the ballroom. Two men in suits, the same ones from the airport, stood at a discreet distance, and Marcus finally realized they were security personnel. "Marcus, I need to come clean about something," Tommy began, looking uncomfortable. "My grandmother asked me not to tell you until after the wedding, but I can't let you leave Chicago without knowing the truth." "What truth?" Marcus asked, growing concerned. Tommy took a deep breath. "My full name is Thomas Whitmore, Jr. My father is Thomas Whitmore, Sr., and he's the founder and CEO of Whitmore Airlines." Marcus felt the world shift slightly around him. Whitmore Airlines, the regional carrier that services the East Coast. "Not just regional anymore," Tommy said quietly. "We've grown significantly in the past 5 years. We now operate over 200 aircraft and serve 43 states." Marcus's mind raced as he processed this information. "But Eleanor, she was worried about affording a simple plane ticket. She lives so modestly." "That's my grandmother's choice," Tommy explained. "When my grandfather Robert died, my father tried to convince her to move to a luxury retirement community, or at least accept a larger monthly allowance. She refused. She insists on living independently on her seamstress income and Robert's small pension." "She doesn't know, does she?" Marcus realized. "About your father's success? About the airline?" Tommy shook his head. "She knows my father works in aviation, but she has no idea about the scope of the business. Dad started the company with 2 small planes when I was in high school. Grandma Eleanor was dealing with Grandpa Robert's illness at the time and never paid much attention to the business details." "Why keep it from her?" "Because she would never accept help if she knew how much money the family has," Tommy said. "She's incredibly proud and independent. Dad sends her money disguised as Social Security increases and pension adjustments. He pays her property taxes through a local charity program. He even has her neighbors paid to check on her, though they don't know the money comes from him." Marcus leaned against the wall, trying to process everything. "So, when she flew yesterday?" "She was flying on one of our aircraft," Tommy confirmed. "Flight 247 is one of our routes. When I heard from Dad's operations team that an elderly passenger named Eleanor Whitmore had missed the flight, I couldn't figure out how my grandmother had ended up on our passenger manifest. The gate agent who helped us rebook, did he know?" "Not initially, but when your names came up in the system for the alternate routing, it triggered security protocols. Anyone traveling with a family member gets flagged automatically." Marcus felt a strange mix of emotions. "So you've known who I am since last night?" "I ran a background check on you, yes," Tommy admitted. "I had to make sure you weren't taking advantage of my grandmother somehow. But everything checked out. You're exactly who you claim to be." They stood in silence for a moment, watching. The wedding guests moved between the ballroom and the cocktail area. "Tommy, there's something I need to ask you," Marcus said. "Your grandmother mentioned that you work for an airline, but she seemed to think you were just middle management." "I am the vice president of customer experience," Tommy said. "But I started in customer service, just like she told you. I worked my way up, though admittedly having the family name didn't hurt." "And she doesn't know about your position either?" "She thinks I'm a customer service supervisor," Tommy said with a slight smile. "Every time I try to tell her about promotions, she changes the subject and starts talking about how proud she is that I have steady work." Marcus couldn't help but laugh. "She raised you to be humble." "She raised all of us to be humble," Tommy corrected. "My father, too. Even though he owns one of the most successful regional airlines in the country, he still drives himself to work and packs his own lunch." "Why are you telling me all this?" Marcus asked. Tommy looked back toward the ballroom where Eleanor was visible through the glass doors, talking animatedly with other guests. "Because what you did yesterday changed everything," Tommy said seriously. "You missed your flight and rearranged your entire business trip to help an elderly woman you'd never met. You drove 3 hours out of your way, paid for her meal, helped cover her flight costs, and made sure she got to Chicago safely. Anyone would have done the same thing." "No, Marcus, they wouldn't have. Do you know how many people walked past my grandmother when she fell at the airport? Do you know how many passengers and airline employees saw her struggling and kept walking?" Marcus felt uncomfortable with the praise. "I just did what felt right." "Exactly," Tommy said. And that tells me everything I need to know about your character. Marcus and Tommy returned to the reception, where Eleanor was holding court at a table surrounded by wedding guests, clearly retelling the story of their cross-country adventure. Her animated gestures and bright smile made it obvious that she was enjoying being the center of attention for once. And then this wonderful young man said he would help me get to Chicago no matter what, Eleanor was saying as they approached. He missed his own important business meeting just to make sure an old woman could see her grandson get married. The guests at the table looked at Marcus with admiration and curiosity. Several of them introduced themselves, and Marcus was surprised to learn they included airline industry executives, Chicago business leaders, and what appeared to be several politicians. "Marcus," Eleanor called out, patting the chair beside her. "Come sit with me. I want you to meet some people." As the evening progressed, Marcus found himself in conversations that revealed the true scope of the Whitmore family's influence. Tommy's father, Thomas Sr., was not only the CEO of Whitmore Airlines but also served on the boards of several major corporations and charitable foundations. Around 10 o'clock, as the reception was winding down, Tommy approached Marcus again. "Marcus, my father would like to meet you. He just arrived from a business trip and heard about what you did for Grandma Eleanor." Tommy led Marcus to a quiet corner of the ballroom where a distinguished man in his early 60s stood talking with Sarah's parents. Thomas Whitmore Sr. had silver hair like his mother, the same intelligent blue eyes, and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to leadership. "Dad, this is Marcus Thompson," Tommy said. "Marcus, my father." Thomas Sr. shook Marcus's hand firmly. "Mr. Thompson, I understand I owe you a tremendous debt of gratitude. My mother means everything to our family." "She's a remarkable woman," Marcus replied. "I was honored to help her." "Tommy tells me you work in technology sales, specifically serving the airline industry." "That's correct. My company provides software solutions for customer service, scheduling, and operational management." Thomas Sr. studied Marcus carefully. "What's your assessment of the current state of customer service in the airline industry?" The question caught Marcus off guard, but he answered honestly. "I think most airlines have lost sight of the fact that they're serving people, not just moving passengers. Technology can improve efficiency, but it can't replace genuine human care and concern." "Interesting perspective," Thomas Sr. said. "And what would you do differently if you were running an airline?" Marcus glanced at Eleanor, who was watching their conversation with obvious curiosity, then back at Thomas Sr. "I'd make sure every employee understood that they're not just processing transactions. They're helping people get to the most important moments of their lives. Weddings, funerals, family reunions, business opportunities that could change someone's career. Every passenger has a story, and every interaction matters." Thomas Sr. nodded slowly. "Tommy, would you excuse us for a moment?" Tommy stepped away, and Thomas Sr. leaned closer to Marcus. "Mr. Thompson, I'm going to be direct with you. We've done our research on your background. Your sales record is impressive, your client relationships are solid, and your reputation in the industry is excellent." Marcus felt a mixture of flattery and unease. "Thank you, but I'm not sure why you're telling me this." "Because I'm about to offer you a job," Thomas Sr. said simply. "Director of Customer Experience for Whitmore Airlines. You'd be working directly with Tommy to oversee all aspects of passenger services across our network." Marcus was stunned. "Mr. Whitmore, I'm flattered, but I barely know your family. This seems like a rather impulsive decision based on one act of kindness." "Is it?" Thomas Sr. challenged. "Marcus, in the airline business, we deal with thousands of passengers every day. Most of our employees see them as problems to be solved or numbers to be processed. Yesterday, you saw my elderly mother as a person who needed help, and you sacrificed your own plans to provide that help." Thomas Sr. paused, looking across the ballroom at Eleanor, who was now dancing slowly with Tommy. "Do you know what she told me when I called to check on her this morning?" Thomas Sr. continued. "She said that meeting you restored her faith in the younger generation. She said you reminded her of her late husband, someone who understood that doing the right thing was more important than doing the convenient thing." Marcus watched Eleanor on the dance floor, her face glowing with joy as she celebrated with her grandson. "Mr. Whitmore, your mother is an amazing woman, but I don't think one good deed qualifies me to run customer experience for an entire airline." "You're right," Thomas Sr. agreed. "One good deed doesn't qualify you. But your response to my mother's situation tells me something about how you think, how you prioritize, and how you treat people when no one is watching and there's no benefit to you." Thomas Sr. pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. "I'm not asking you to decide tonight, but I want you to consider this opportunity. We're not just another airline, Marcus. We're trying to build something different. A company that remembers that aviation is about connecting people to the things and people they love most." Marcus took the card and looked at the figure written on the back. The salary offer was nearly double what he currently made. "There's one condition," Thomas Sr. added with a slight smile. "You'd have to relocate to Chicago." "I'd be working with Tommy?" "You'd be working for Tommy, actually. He's being promoted to Senior Vice President of Operations next month. The customer experience role would report directly to him." Marcus looked around the ballroom at the wedding celebration, at Eleanor, still dancing with various family members, at Tommy and Sarah talking with their guests, at the warm family atmosphere that surrounded him. "Can I ask you something, Mr. Whitmore?" Marcus said. "Why does Eleanor still live so modestly if your family is so successful?" Thomas Sr.'s expression grew tender. "Because she taught us that success isn't measured by what you accumulate, but by what you give and how you treat others. She worked 2 jobs to put my father through mechanic school, raised 4 children in a house barely big enough for 2, and never complained about what she didn't have." He paused, watching his mother laugh at something one of the wedding guests had said. "When I started the airline, she was my first investor," Thomas Sr. continued. "She gave me the $2,000 she had saved for a new roof, told me to follow my dreams, and said the roof could wait. She's never asked for a penny back, never asked for special treatment, and never wanted credit for her role in the company's success. So you help her secretly?" "We try to, but she's very independent. The monthly checks we send get returned with notes saying she doesn't need charity. The gifts we try to give her get donated to her neighbors who she thinks need them more. The only way we can help her is through anonymous contributions to local programs she qualifies for." Marcus understood now why Eleanor had been so concerned about the flight costs, and why she had insisted on paying him back for his help. "Mr. Whitmore, I need some time to think about your offer." "Of course, take all the time you need. But Marcus, I want you to know that this isn't charity or a thank you gift. This is a business decision based on the qualities you demonstrated yesterday." As the reception began to wind down, Eleanor made her way over to Marcus and Thomas Sr. "Ari, you two having a good conversation?" she asked, looking pleased to see them talking. "We certainly are, Mom," Thomas Sr. said, kissing her cheek. "Marcus is even more impressive than you described." Eleanor beamed with pride. "I told you he was special. He has what Robert used to call good heart sense, the ability to know the right thing to do, even when it's not the easy thing to do." Later, that evening, as Marcus sat in his hotel room reviewing the business card and the salary figure Thomas Sr. had written on it, he found himself thinking about the past 3 days. He had missed an important presentation, spent hundreds of dollars on unexpected travel costs, and completely disrupted his carefully planned schedule. Yet he felt more satisfied and fulfilled than he had in years. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Eleanor. "Marcus, dear, I hope I'm not calling too late." "Not at all, Eleanor. How are you feeling after such a big day?" "Wonderful, simply wonderful. But I wanted to call you before you fly back home tomorrow. I have something to confess." Marcus smiled. "What's that?" "I may not have been entirely truthful about our family's circumstances," Eleanor said carefully. "Tommy and his father seem to think I don't know about their business success, but I'm not as naive as they believe." Marcus was intrigued. "What do you mean?" "Dear, I may be old, but I'm not blind. When your grandson starts wearing $1,000 suits and your son pays cash for a house, you begin to suspect the family business is doing better than they're letting on. So you know about the airline?" Eleanor chuckled. "I've known for years, but they seemed so determined to take care of their poor old grandmother without hurting her pride that I decided to let them think they were fooling me. Marcus laughed out loud. Eleanor, you are absolutely amazing. The truth is, Marcus, I live modestly because I choose to, not because I have to. Money doesn't change who you are at heart, it just reveals who you were all along. My family has stayed humble and generous despite their success, which makes me prouder than any